Reprise de débat. The honourable member for Kootenay, Columbia.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It was only 13 months ago when I attended an orientation session for new members of Parliament here in Ottawa. And we had a cameo appearance from the Prime Minister, which was very much appreciated by all of us. During that cameo appearance, he said, "The role of opposition is to make government better." I fail to see how bringing time limitations to debate works towards that objective of making government better, but I will do my best in the time I have to make some suggestions on how we can make this a better bill. I want to start with small businesses and, of course, with the tax break for the middle class. And, of course, in my riding of Kootenay, Columbia, when I tell people about the tax break for the middle class, which goes from $45,000 up to potentially, let's say, $190,000, quite frankly, Madam Speaker, my constituents just shake their heads. We did put forward an amendment to that to try and bring it down to $20,000 to $45,000, and that amendment was defeated in this House. But I can assure you that middle class in my riding of Kootenay, Columbia is not $45,000 to $190,000. In terms of small businesses, I'm holding a series of sessions around the riding, meeting with small businesses and bringing together a representative of the provincial government, municipal government, along with myself representing federal government, to talk to small businesses about how we can really help them get ahead. And interesting enough, what they had on their list, and this was from a meeting I held recently in Fernie, in terms of how to help small businesses, you won't find too much of congruity between that and what's in the current bill from our friends across the floor. I'll just read you their list of how to help small businesses. Payroll taxes. Businesses want a clearer understanding of how they're being used. Temporary foreign workers program. Program is cumbersome and needs fixing. $1,000 fee is too high. No clear path to citizenship. So turnover is high. They thought there should be an increase in minimum wage. There's a need for subsidized, affordable housing units. This is from small businesses, Madam Speaker. Redesign programs to be suitable for small businesses rather than just targeting medium-sized businesses and manufacturing. There's a real lack of support for small business programs. Expand youth employment programs. Introduce a scientific development tax credit, currently not available for sole proprietorships. Adopt digital technology. The digital technology adoption program should be redeveloped for use by small businesses. And recognize and rectify the reality of the digital divide in rural areas and small communities, which is a barrier to cloud-based systems. And redefine broadband to bring to the level of modern requirements. Right now, the definition of broadband is too low in terms of speed. Canada Post needs to reinstate more affordable shipping options, such as particularly for books. We have a book publisher in my riding. It can cost him more to ship a book via Canada Post than it does in terms of the profit he makes on that particular book. And credit card fees are too high for small local businesses. So these are things coming right from small businesses that, had they been included in this budget, would have made this a much better budget for small businesses. I want to turn now to helping people in need and in real need. You know, 15% of Canadian children live in poverty, and for Aboriginal children, that number is 27%. And in my home province of BC, the rate of child poverty is even worse than the Canadian average at 19.8%. And the majority of these children have parents in paid work. So you think about that for a moment. 1 in every 5 children in British Columbia are living in poverty. My colleague from St. Hyacinthe Bagot had a recommendation for Bill C-245 that would help fix some of that by bringing in the Office of the Commissioner for Poverty Reduction and proposing a national council for the promotion of social inclusion and elimination of poverty. Mr. Speaker, approximately 35,000 Canadians are homeless on any given night in the year. And 1 in 5 households are at risk of homelessness because they spend over 50% of their income just to secure shelter. Yet over the past 25 years, while the population of Canada has increased by 30%, national housing investment has decreased by 46%. We need a national housing strategy, and I know the government has one on the books, but we really need to see the details to see whether that is really going to help the groups that need it. And this morning I met with a group called Inclusion BC, and number one on their list is also affordable housing for people who are living with challenges. And they want that housing to be integrated so that people with challenges are part of a regular community and not set aside in special housing. So affordable housing for all Canadians is really important moving forward. But we do need to see and hear a little bit more about what's in the budget around that particular initiative. Infrastructure. As a former mayor, I can tell you how important, of course, having access to dollars for infrastructure is, particularly for smaller communities. I was mayor of a community that had about 20,000 people. And when you look at the current formula that was in place for many years, which was a one-third formula, where the municipality had to come up with the first one-third, provincial government the second one-third, federal government the one-third, their one-third. For small communities, coming up with that first one-third is a real challenge. And I'll just give you a quick example. In Cranbrook, if we wanted to raise $1 million through property taxes, every 1% increase in property tax equals $200,000. So to raise $1 million to meet our one-third, that's a 5% increase in property taxes. Madam Speaker, you're not very popular as a mayor with a 5% increase in property taxes just to cover one project. So as the infrastructure project rolls out, we need to make sure that the federal government continues to provide at least 50% of that infrastructure dollars, and that the provinces continue to provide their 33 1/3%, reducing municipalities' input to little over 16%. Infrastructure funding needs to be long-term so that municipalities can plan. It shouldn't be just 1 year at a time. We need to change the definition of infrastructure. Again, those of you who have worked for municipalities know that infrastructure is generally considered to be sewer, water, roads, and storm drains. We need to add dark fiber and high-speed internet as a basic, fundamental piece of infrastructure in all communities moving forward. So great to see some money in infrastructure, but how that money rolls out is really important. And I can tell you in 2014, the Conservatives announced a multi-billion-dollar infrastructure program, and none of it made it to us in the municipalities that year, at least out in rural areas. And in the end, my Conservative colleague at the time, who was our Member of Parliament, blamed the province for not getting on board and getting the money out. But we need to make sure that the infrastructure dollars actually make it out into communities. I want to talk a little bit about the private sector and involvement in infrastructure. We had one project in Cranbrook, and this was prior to when I became mayor, which was our recreational complex, which was a private-public partnership. That partnership went bad, and the city had to buy out the private partner. We ended up with about 15 years worth of 8% loans, locked in at 8% and higher, that we could not get out of, even though as a municipality we could borrow money at about 2%. From a special fund in British Columbia. So from Cranbrook's perspective, privatization of infrastructure does not work. And to me, the thought of selling airports or bridges just to reduce the deficit, this $30 to $40 billion deficit, is absolutely the wrong way to try and get a deficit under control. You don't sell your assets in order to pay down debt. So, Madam Speaker, those are just a few of the ways I think that this budget could be improved. There are some good things in that budget, but there are many ways to make it better, and I do hope that we can see a better future for poverty, for small businesses, and the way infrastructure is handled in Canada and, of course, in Kootenay, Columbia. Thank you, Madam Speaker.